Welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast, where we look at marketing principles, strategies, and tactics through the lens of space. Information relating to our discussion today and links to the video version can be found in the episode show notes on spacemarketingpodcast.com. Spaceports are near and dear to my heart. I am getting ready to launch my next book, Space Marketing, Spaceports, that will help develop a spaceport and other such initiatives that are audacious. Many areas cannot have a rocket launch. They may not have a desert or ocean and have too many people. But the need for transportation to and from space is great, and it is growing at a fast speed. Horizontal space launches are a part of the solution. Our guest today focuses on the next phase of commerce between orbit and planet, with plans on providing transportation solutions for the next era of space. You cannot have a conversation about space transportation without talking about Sierra Space. My guest, Christopher Allison, Senior Business Management Director for Sierra Space, provides valuable logistics to getting the program off the ground. Pardon the pun. Dream Chaser is not your only baby now, is it? Congratulations on being a daddy.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it and excited to be here.
You've been with Sierra Space for about 10 years now. Can you introduce the audience to who Sierra Space is?
Sure. So we're, I think, a newer known brand in the last year and a half. So my tenure with the company, I started with the company Sierra Nevada Corporation. And within that company, there was a space systems group that was focused in developing Dream Chaser, as well as some other space technologies, small satellites, components for other satellites, those kind of things. So for most of my career, I've worked on Dream Chaser. I worked in regulatory policy. I have a background in aerospace engineering. And a lot of my focus was on how to license and get approvals to be able to launch and land Dream Chaser safely and legally, both here in the US and outside of the US as well. And then Sierra Space is a carve out of that space systems group from Sierra Nevada Corporation. So about a year and a half ago, we carved that out as a standalone entity and then went out and did a Series A capital raise. And so now we are an independent company, Sierra Space, embarking upon the continuation of the Dream Chaser program, our partnership with Blue Origin now and Orbital Reef, and a focus on building in-space destinations. So as you mentioned at the beginning, logistics to a destination and then back to Earth, and really building out the backbone of the LEO economy.
The Dream Chaser is, in my opinion, the culmination of two of my favorite things. I describe it, when I talk to people, I describe it as SeaWorld Shamu and the space shuttle having a baby. That's what the Dream Chaser looks like. And I know that you have two different types of Dream Chasers. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the program?
Sure. Yeah. So right now, our initial contract that we have for service of Dream Chaser is with NASA as a cargo resupply series of missions to the International Space Station. And so under that program, we've been developing what we're calling DC-100. So that's a cargo variant of Dream Chaser. So we will provide logistics that's moving passive cargo, active cargo, unpressurized cargo to the space station. They'll unload it, load things back up that they either want disposed of or returned back to Earth for post-flight analysis, and we provide those logistics. In our portfolio, we're also developing what we call DC-200. So that's our crew capable vehicle. Main difference on that vehicle is it's less focused on cargo and more focused on the humans. So up to 6 humans can fly on that vehicle at any given time. There'll be some cargo capacity on that vehicle, and then looking to use that as human logistics to get people, whether that's NASA astronauts, sovereign astronauts from another country, space tourists, spaceflight participants, those kind of things, as we start to build out our destinations in orbit and have needs for people to go to and from those locations.
Well, the Dream Chaser is a bit of a game changer. It really, truly is. And you're going to be able to Say like you have some product that you're developing in space. Now you have the ways and means to be able to bring it down or take things back up without having, it is a game changer and it can land at any airport. Well,
Yeah, we
not any airport, but
I know. So I'll put my regulatory hat on in a little bit, and we can talk about the complexities of any airport. um, but yeah, we agree that there are some differentiators and some disruptive capabilities within Dream Chaser. So one of the key things is because it's a lifting body vehicle design, meaning it doesn't perform a ballistic reentry into the atmosphere. We're able to control the G profile on the platform. And so for certain markets that we think are key to opening up or unlocking this LEO economy are really focused on either biopharma type drug discovery developments, some biomanufacturing in space, even advanced materials. A lot of those things are potentially highly sensitive to a G loading profile re-entering the atmosphere. So Dream Chaser offers the capability to bring back certain things developed in space in a pristine condition. To your point about being able to integrate into the current national airspace system and then land at licensed and approved airports and spaceports, that allows us to be, I think, more specific to customer needs in terms of distribution of goods developed in space, people coming back from space, etc. So it allows us to be more targeted in terms of integrating into these other terrestrial markets.
well, and when you talk about the biofarm and those type of products, we have Space Tango here in Kentucky, which is where I'm from. Space Tango is developing artificial retinas that will enable people with macular degeneration to see. And RedWire is developing 3D printed organs in the ISS. It could make it to where people can see and people can have organ transplants without rejection. So this is huge, and so it's a very soft landing that doesn't disturb a lot of things.
Yeah. So it's pretty close to a 1G environment here, but yeah, 1.5Gs is our kind of peak during reentry.
And let's talk about the airports. You have Huntsville is got FAA approval for spaceport for you to land, and so has Cornwall. Are there any other spaceports that are on the docket?
So let's talk a little bit about spaceport licensing in general, because one, the term spaceport is actually very colloquial in a sense that in the actual regulations in the U.S., the term spaceport isn't reflected. Spaceports are referred to from a regulatory perspective as launch sites, like commercial launch sites and commercial reentry sites. So for us, for Dream Chaser, we launch conventionally on a rocket vertically. So typically we'll launch here from the U.S. out of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station / Kennedy Space Center down in Florida. For reentry, though, we need to integrate into either a federal range or a commercially licensed spaceport. And so, from a licensing perspective, there's actually two licenses that are needed. One for the spaceport itself, so the reentry site operator's license. That's a Part 433 license in the FAA regulations. And then we, as a vehicle, need to get a Part 450 license, which is a reentry vehicle license. So in the case of Huntsville was successful in receiving their Part 433 license, so their their reentry site operator's license. We are in the process of working with them and the FAA to get our Part 450 license. So in this sense, we're halfway licensed to be able to operate at Huntsville. Now looking to Cornwall, where we have an MOU and we've done some preliminary studies and some analysis to demonstrate that we can land the vehicle there. It's an interesting nuance because as a US based company, when we are acting outside of the US, so performing a reentry operation in the UK as an example, we are still licensed and governed by the US regulatory authority. So we still have to get an FAA reentry license. On top of that, though, we have to then assimilate into whatever regulatory environment exists in that country. So that's what we're working on now, is understanding what are the reentry regulation requirements in the UK, how do those align with what's in the US, and is there any differences that we need to work through. So some work ahead of us there. And then in terms of other sites that we're looking at, we have announced an MOU to look at the Oida Prefecture in Japan. And so we're similarly trying to figure out the Japanese regulatory environment in contrast to the US regulatory environment and sort through those details. And these things that I'm talking about don't happen overnight. These are multi-year processes. There's a lot of regulations, especially in other countries outside the US, that haven't even been developed yet. So we're very much on the front end of helping kind of inform and influence some of these things for countries that maybe haven't thought about this to a maturity that the US has.
Well, and you have your launch that is going to be going to the ISS, and it is in the research, it was the third quarter of next year.
Yeah, so next year we have our first flight to ISS, and then that particular mission, so the ISS missions that we have on contract with NASA will land at the former shuttle landing facility, which is located on Kennedy Space Center's property. But another nuance there is there's an organization in Florida called Space Florida that is an economic development group of Florida that owns and operates, or manages rather, the spaceport there now. And they have gotten commercial licensing for commercial launch site operation as well as commercial reentry operations. So we are equally at the very, very pinnacle of working our 450 license right now with the FAA to be able to get our license that we need to be able to land there on this first flight. So it's a lot of things that you have to get to all meet at the same endpoint. So it's a lot of tactical and strategic management of different regulations and everything. So it's exciting. It's not easy, but we're getting there.
Well, space is hard, and space is definitely hard. So all aspects of space. I know that part of the plan for the Dream Chasers to go into other countries. You were just telling us about Japan, and what kind of services or incentives do you recommend spaceports put into their plan so somebody like Sierra Space can access it in the future? I mean, a spaceport is a long game out there, and we need to, it takes a long time to build just a regular airport, much less a spaceport.
Sure.
So what type of incentives or services do you look at?
Yeah, when we, really started thinking about our strategy in terms of building this global network of spaceports for us to service the demand that we envision, as we build these destinations and the LEO economy blossoms, we really focused on being able to integrate into what I'll say is like a commonplace type airport environment. So in terms of the runway requirements that we have, it's pretty typical of pretty common aircraft like a 737 as an example. So we don't have extremely exotic runway requirements that can be challenging from an infrastructure perspective. So that's step one for us. Two, once we land, we have some needs for some sheltering of the vehicle and like a hangar, those kind of things. And the vehicle's of a size that those hangars that exist for current aircraft are fully suitable for what we need. So we have, some natural integration there into those environments. Some of the things, as you start thinking about like the long-term planning of a spaceport, one thing that I've noticed working with spaceports for a long time is, I think early on, a lot of spaceports viewed the vehicle operator, so Sierra Space in this case, with Dream Chaser as the end customer. And I used to get a lot of phone calls and people would be like, "Hey, we want Dream Chaser to land here. What do we need to do?" And the real answer is, well, you need to have kind of your niche, what is it that you do at your spaceport? What other industries are you connected into? What industrial base do you have at that spaceport that drives the demand? Because ultimately, it's the customers that are buying a mission on Dream Chaser, the products that are being developed in space, the people that are flying in space that are going to dictate ultimately where the vehicle lands, within the bounds of physics. And so it's really looking at the whole ecosystem, and it's beyond just, hey, a vehicle can land here. And so the way we view it from a Sierra Space perspective is Dream Chaser is kind of a tool in order to help bolster some commerce in that industrial base in an area. So what we're working on with spaceports is building out that whole vision of what is it that you want to build in terms of an industrial base? What are the things that they need access to space for and return from space for? And then how can Dream Chaser help enable all of that, right? So that you have this whole value chain that connects and makes sense and then drives like an economic engine.
that's just the to and from planet and orbit. But you guys are expanding past that. So you have the orbital reef that you're working with Blue Origin, and you're going to be kind of like setting up roadways up within the orbit as well, not just necessarily coming down. Do you want to talk about a little bit about the orbital reef project?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So where we are in terms of like the United States like participation in low Earth orbit, NASA right now is the primary facilitator, along with the international partners on the ISS. ISS has been amazing. It's a technical marvel, and it's produced a lot of incredible advancements for us as humans. But it's getting old. So at some point in 2030 is kind of the date right now that Congress has agreed to, the international partners have mostly agreed to, of the lifetime of ISS. And so NASA is laying the groundwork now for what happens next. What is our strategy in low Earth orbit, and balanced with our further exploration of the moon, Mars, deep space, etc. And so right now, NASA is really shifting towards a commercial services model in low Earth orbit, where they want commercial companies to be the facilitators and the owners of facilities, vehicles, those kind of things. And NASA wants to buy services on a commercial basis from those to still meet NASA's needs, but also to help kind of underpin the growth of commercial activity in LEO. And so with Orbital Reef and our partners on Blue Origin, we were successful in getting an award through what they called the CLD program, Commercial LEO Destinations. And this is like an initial, I'll call it seed money from NASA to start developing what this platform would look like that could be a replacement to the ISS. Ultimately, there will be additional phases in this contract where NASA will actually commit to the purchase of those services. But we're highly confident that we're building a really robust platform. And in parallel, and the team that I support now is off working the market development, the generation of all these other demand signals and customers that are going to help augment. Because NASA doesn't want to be the customer, they want to be one of many customers, right? And so the onus is on us to go and find these other commercial use cases. And fortunately for us, we have Dream Chaser in our portfolio for some of the disruptive reasons we talked about earlier, really helps build out that whole ecosystem. So not only do we have the logistics side, now we have the place to do commerce in space and make all these connections, the roadways or the railways, as you mentioned earlier.
And you develop habitats as well, don't you?
We do. So yeah, there are many things that we do here, and so it's a really exciting time. And so one of our major contributions to the Orbital Reef platform is our life habitat. And this is a technology we've been developing with NASA for deep space transportation, surface habitation, as well as LEO habitats. And it's an expandable technology. So in a conventional fairing on a rocket, the ISS modules are a certain diameter because that was like the biggest that you could physically make them to still get them to space. The technology that we have can pack really small, and then when on orbit, inflate into a 300 cubic meter volume. So it's basically a three-story building in orbit. And so we think that that's a really disruptive and differentiating technology that allows us to more efficiently get volume on space. So the initial onset or deployment of Orbital Reef, in a matter of 3 launches, roughly, we will have about 90% of the current volume of ISS in terms of like pressurized volume. Whereas ISS, I believe, took about 42 launches to build. So if you start talking about the economics of deploying these systems on orbit, launch is by far one of the biggest costs still. Those prices are coming down, but it's still a big cost driver. So anything that we can do to reduce the amount of times we have to take stuff to space really brings down the cost points for us to be able to start, growing these commercial markets on orbit.
So when do you see that actually being deployed?
Yeah, so our plan right now is in the 2027 timeframe to have the initial elements of Orbital Reef up. Obviously, where we are right now, we're working on getting Dream Chaser flying. We're doing a lot of the technology development around our inflatable or expandable habitat, the life habitat. And so over the next several years, as we start to get flights with Dream Chaser, we'll start to see, certain technology demonstrations, those kind of things that are building up to that road and that deployment of Orbital Reef in the 2027 timeframe.
Let's go back to the actual Dream Chaser for a minute. And that is all happened and maybe 10 years away from now, and we're starting to get around the moon. So are you looking at transportation beyond our orbit?
Yeah, so the way we're structured here at Sierra Space is we have kind of three major sectors. One is transportation, that's primarily Dream Chaser right now. We have our destinations group, Orbital Reef, our life habitat, these key technologies for building the destinations. And then we have an applications group. So this is all of our solar array components, gimbals, high precision, um, pointing devices, actuators, those kind of things. So a lot of our like tier 3 supply out of that group. We also have an advanced programs group. And so within advanced programs is where we're starting to look to some of the things that you're asking about in terms of like what's next, next. That kind of 15 to 30 year vision of the company and everything. And so, yeah, looking at our core competencies and our technologies and looking at where we go from there. I mentioned the life habitat as an example. Originally was part of the Next Step program with NASA, which is looking at like deep space transportation and habitation at Lunar Gateway and then to and from Mars. So already we have extensibility and the foundations of a technology for deeper space exploration and stuff beyond LEO.
Yeah, because it'll be here before you know it.
No, it's coming fast. I mean, and the thing that I've noticed a lot that I find just really interesting and encouraging is just as I think the notion of access to space or those barriers to entry have lowered, whether that's cost or even just perception, like the amount of ideas that are just pouring out of companies right now and coming out of university research and stuff, like every day I'm just amazed at how people are seeing and connecting these dots of how to monetize certain things in space and everything. So it's like super exciting. And my brain is like overloaded some days with just like so many ways that, I mean, space is unlocking so many different markets. And it's not just the microgravity side, it's just the viewpoint of space, the things that you can see, climate research, things that you can look at in deep space. I mean, it's amazing what's up there. And so we're excited. I'm excited to just be a part of that journey. And we really want to just, be the foundation of allowing people to bring these ideas to the table and bring them to fruition.
The most recent figure that I've heard is that there are 77 countries now with space programs. So even if, for example, the last 50 years, it has depended upon whether or not Congress votes in a budget, it's not dependent upon that anymore. It's happening, regardless of if we do it or not. The rest of the world is going to be doing it, and they are just, oh my goodness, it is amazing to watch. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just beyond, what I'll call is like government funding sources, right? With all these different, official space agencies of different nations, just the amount of private money going into space companies, the number of startups, the investments and everything, even through the pandemic, some record investments, ours being one of them in our Series A capital raise. I mean, there's clearly a sense that space is the new frontier in terms of like economic potential, the economy, contributions that it can make, those kind of things. And so yeah, it's harnessing all of that excitement and all of these ideas and stuff. And then again, putting on my regulatory hat and some of this world that I've lived in for several years, there's a lot of things that we frankly have to catch up on from a U.S. regulatory perspective. I mean, beyond just licensing the launch of a vehicle and the reentry of a vehicle and a spaceport for these activities to happen at, there's a lot of questions right now being discussed in DC around what is like the approval that you have to go through to do certain things on orbit. What does mission authorization, what does supervision look like? And the US, as a signatory on the International Space Treaty, we have certain obligations to follow those things. And so, and make sure that our actors, aka companies from the US, are following the rules of what we have agreed to on an international stage. And so, when this agreement was originally written, I don't think it was contemplated that commercial companies would be doing a lot of the stuff that they're doing today, right? It was government doing most of it previously. So it's just really put the regulatory environment in a new context. And so there's a lot of work going on with the National Space Council, in the White House, Department Department of Commerce, FAA, FCC, NOAA, etc. I mean, the list just keeps going of people who have touch points, different regulatory agencies. And so it's an exciting time, but at the same time, we have some pivotal and key decisions that we have to make in terms of our governance and regulatory oversight of this. That's really going to set up, how successful the future can be. So, we're focused on a lot, and it's very important.
And it's a balancing act, because you want to make it to where it's still competitive and that people can access it and the commercial industry can grow at a healthy rate, but we can't afford to have any accidents.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
we just can't afford to go there. So it has to be safe. They're working really hard on that.
No, and that is, I will say, a cornerstone of every conversation that we've been in, that industry's been in, both here in the U.S. and outside the U.S. in terms of the cornerstone of all these regulations is safety, right? And when we all get on an airplane, the government has certified and blessed those aircraft that it's, considered safe enough for us as, everyday citizens to fly on. Space operates a little bit differently. When a spaceflight participant gets on a rocket, they are assuming that there's some risk, right? Because in terms of the maturity of a rocket versus a commercial airliner, just far less operations per year. The number of years we've been doing this is far less. It's a very, space is hard, as you said earlier.
Yes.
And so there is an assumption of the risk there. But as we start to expand beyond just, tens of dozens of people flying to space every year to hundreds, then to thousands, and then, hopefully to millions at some point, we're really going to have to shift, the safety of these systems. And that's just a key cornerstone of what we're working on.
And this is really a long view, because like when I was talking earlier about airports, we have an airport, a general aviation airport that has a runway of about 5,000 feet. It is taken 17 years to get it to where it hasn't even had a plane fly out of it yet. So this is a very long game, but the technology and the competition is moving a lot faster than what it is going to take to get a lot of these spaceports built.
Yeah. No, and so that's, piece of our, I guess, approach is, we're building out this network of spaceports. And I mentioned earlier that from the conversations step of like, hey, spaceport, we're a vehicle, hey, should we, work on something together, to like actually getting licenses is a multi-year process. And so what we're seeing is, as we've been discussing, industry is moving so fast and all these ideas are popping up so quickly. And we're starting to get phone calls of people like, hey, I have this thing. I've got some, financial backing, but I need to fly a demonstration like in 6 months before, I, lose the interest of my investors or whatever. And we cannot be in a position as an industry to say, okay, great, but for that, it's actually a 4-year timeline to get the mission approved and all these licenses and stuff. And so what we're trying to do is be proactive and build out this network of spaceports, get the licensing done initially so that we have the ability to operate, so we can be far more responsive to our customer needs. And so there's a lot of strategy in that. And then ultimately there's going to be some tactical elements to it. It's just kind of unavoidable. But that's where we're looking is we as we get more and more regulations around these things, it's just trying to anticipate where the market's going and get some of that stuff out of the way just so that we can be responsive.
Hold on to your boosters. We will be right back with guest Christopher Allison and talk about how Sierra Space is getting their word out after a brief message from our sponsors. Now I'm gonna flip it a little bit, and we're gonna talk about marketing. Now,
Okay.
when I say marketing, it's mainly not necessarily how do you get the sales, but it's how do you get the word out? How do you get the word out about space, your education initiatives, your outreach, and maybe a little bit of sales? So, what are some things that you do to spread the idea of space and get the word out?
Sure. Yeah. So this is so the team I work on right now, I'm in our business development and sales organization. So not only working some of this long-term planning with spaceports, but then also the how do we acquire customers? How do we meet their needs? How do we make sure what we're building will service what they want to do in space, right? And get again all these things to intersect at the right time, which is a bit of a dance. But there is, I would say, a robust community of people who have done stuff in space on the ISS. And the ISS National Laboratory, formerly CASIS, has done a great job of building up, commercial usage of ISS. But when you zoom back for a second and you look at the people who I would say are, I'll call them space believers versus the rest of the economy, I mean, that is a tiny portion right now. And so there's so much opportunity out there. But what we're finding is companies don't even look up when they're trying to solve a problem. So a biopharma company is an example. When they're charting a path to do a new drug discovery, microgravity access isn't even like a tool on a lot of their tool belts to go help solve that problem. And so what we're focused on right now is spreading the word, if you will, and getting that information out there and trying to do some educational things. And there's a ton of conferences every year, right? I mean, we could drown ourselves in the number of conferences and always be on airplanes and stuff. And so we're trying to be very tactical and work with other industry partners because we do believe in a rising tides raise all boats kind of philosophy, right? That the more people that we get to look up, as I say, and view space as a tool to help do some of these developments and discoveries and solve problems and challenges here on Earth, the better off we're all going to be because it's more robust in space economy. And so we're getting out there trying to get to what I'll call non-conventional space events, those kind of things, and just kind of educate about microgravity. We have a strong consortium of universities that we work with as well to help educate there and like non-traditional disciplines as well. So yeah, we're very much in market development and education mode right now and trying to capitalize on some of the technologies that have been demonstrated in space. But it's not trivial, and again, it's long range planning. These things don't happen overnight. So we're being very strategic, with elements of tactical where it makes sense.
When you say non-traditional type of avenues, what do you mean?
I mean, so there's like conferences as an example that are branded as space conferences, right? And you go there and you probably know a lot of the companies and people there. There are other events, intersection points with venture capital, with different startup communities, established companies, et cetera, that have never heard about a space conference before, right? So it's trying to get into those areas, get in front of those audiences and educate them on space, beyond what they've maybe seen on NASA TV or on YouTube or something, and kind of demonstrate some of the science and the work and the research that's been done on ISS that are the key indicators that there is certain differentiators that happen in microgravity, right, that could be disruptive to problems that they're solving.
Well, and you do have a very nice booth, by the way, which is a huge thing when you're going to all these things. You need to have the right look and appearance, and you have to have the right information that people can pick up off of it. So kudos on your booth. That
Oh,
is
thank you very much.
very,
Yeah, no,
very
our marketing
educational.
team and communications team here has done a great job, and a lot of this is translating stuff, right? I mean, space is always viewed as, I mean, there's a reason there's a saying in our society of like, well, it's not like it's rocket science, right? Because rocket science has always been, and space has always been perceived as like really difficult and like foreign almost, right, to like most people. And what we're trying to do is, I'll say, democratize that access and that understanding, and that companies like ours, what we're doing is like we want to provide space as a service, right? So let us do the hard rocket science stuff and you do the cool other science stuff that you want to do, or materials discovery, or marketing and branding placement. I mean, there's so many options in space that I think have only scratched the surface on, that we just need to kind of lower those barriers of entry to. And so that's what we're really focused on right now.
So, what would you say are some of the challenges on getting the word out? What have you had, as far as challenges with your community, legislators, and getting information where it needs to go?
I think the first challenge is just understanding where to go, right? The biggest bang
Yes.
for your buck, right? I mean, if we choose to go to a conference or something, what is the return on investment of the time that we spent, travel costs, those kind of things? Um, and it's just interesting talking with the community because, we go into I've gone personally into some conversations and I just start talking microgravity. And the audience like still thinks that like the space shuttle flies, like there's just this huge disconnect between like what people know about our access to space. They know NASA, that's a very well-known brand. They know, other companies like Sierra Space or SpaceX or Blue Origin. But again, there's this like foreignness to it to them, I think, in a lot of markets that just they don't think about it. Like they sit down and they're doing their job that day, and then it's like, oh, I didn't even think that space could be relevant to what I'm doing, right? So it's a tremendous amount of education, and in some extent, it has to be like almost at the individual level, right, or at a company level, right, and that's timely. Like it takes a lot of time. It's costly in time. So yeah, I would say that's a major challenge. Is like how do you effectively, target big audiences where you can, effectively message some of these things, without it and have a decent ROI on what you're getting out. On the regulatory side, I think we're getting, I've seen pretty strong support. I mean, I think both sides of the aisle per se is always very supportive of space, and I think sees the benefits of it. There's always the national security component too, which helps, but then from a commercialization of space is sometimes a hindrance as well, right? Because a rocket to launch a military satellite versus to launch a commercial communication satellite, same rocket, same technology, and so can be classified in a way that's pertinent to national security, right? So then limits maybe how much we can sell that rocket to a foreign entity, foreign company, et cetera, right? So that's getting back to regulation. I'm a regulatory nerd, and that's like one of those things too. That's just how do we balance our national security interests with our commercial interests moving forward. So that's going to be a challenge. This is going to be something we're just going to have to figure out.
Which is a whole nother opportunity for people that are looking into getting into space. I mean, space laws, space regulations. There's all kinds of different opportunities for different careers that are just blossoming all over the place.
Absolutely. And so this is a great point. Just even just in talking with like friends and family and stuff, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm not an engineer. Like space isn't for me." And me personally, I have an engineering degree in aerospace engineering. I went a very traditional route, but a ton of people I work with, right? I mean, we're talking about markets, running businesses in space. So we need people with finance backgrounds, accounting backgrounds. We need people with interior design backgrounds, right? As you start talking about the notion of building hotels in space, like people don't want to go to a tin can necessarily. They want to go and maybe have a 5-star experience in space. So what does that look like in the context of no gravity, right? You now
Right.
have this like 3-dimensional hotel versus, a gravity bound hotel. We now have people who have, deep technical backgrounds in biopharmaceuticals and advanced materials and all these things. So yeah, we're as our company hiring a ton of different disciplines, and so this notion that I have to be an aerospace engineer or something to get into space isn't the case anymore. Like we need everybody on board because there's going to be so much to do in space.
Yes, service providers, even chefs, people
Yeah,
that are going to be out there, they want to have a decent meal.
yep, yeah. And
Yep.
how does that work in microgravity? You can't toss your saute your peppers or something in a pan because they'll fly everywhere in space. So yeah, like
Yes.
there's just so many things that you have to think about that we take for granted here on Earth when we talk about like the assumption of gravity, right? Because it's what we've all grown up in. And so when you take that away, there's just infinite possibility.
Right. And infinite challenges. And it needs
Yes.
all kinds of minds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So infinite opportunity and then infinite job security, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if we take out a crystal ball and we look at maybe what's on down the line for 10, 20, 30 years, because that's a short span of time when you're talking space. Where do you see it?
Ooh. Um, so one thing that our CEO Tom Weiss has said several times that I really resonate with is like we're in this what we're kind of dubbing the orbital age right now, right? We've gone through the Bronze Age, like some of these other things, the Industrial Revolution. So I really firmly believe we are in this orbital age, right? And we're right at the very beginning of it. And to the point you made earlier, we're kind of laying the highways, the railroad network, all these kind of things. But I think we're going to see this exponential growth of commerce in space, the LEO economy, the creativity of what people want to do. I really, I mean, I think we'll see thousands of people in space probably in that time frame. We really, I think are aspirational and want to see millions of people living and working in space. Emphasis on the working side, right? I think tourism is going to be a key component of flying to space, but I don't think that's going to be the long term, like main economic engine. My personal opinion, just my view on the world and stuff. But yeah, I think there's going to be multiple space stations around Earth and other destinations. I think there's going to be this whole logistics network of fueling depots and just you know orbital highways basically of logistics and things. So I don't know. I'm really excited.
Well, the highways didn't just pop up. I mean,
Yeah.
it took several decades for the infrastructure to build like we have it today. Even the aerospace industry, the aviation industry, if you go back even as little as like the 1980s, it wasn't what it is today. It
Yeah.
wasn't the mass moving of people. It was just for the few. And now millions fly, which is mind blowing when you consider just how short that industry has even been in existence.
Yeah. Yeah, I read
So
a statistic at one point that at any given time there can be like 60,000 people in the air above the U.S. just because all in airplanes and everything moving around. Like that's just a mind blowing number sometimes, and I don't know how accurate that is, but it was just the concept that there's that many people in the air just over the U.S.'s airspace at any given time is crazy. And when the Inspiration 4 mission launched, I believe we hit a world record of the most people in space at one time, and it was 14 people, and that was 4 people on the Inspiration capsule. I think that was 3 people on the Chinese space station, and then the remainder on the International Space Station. Right. So to get 14 people into space right now, we had to use 3 different platforms.
right.
Right. So like I think that shows like where we are today and where I mean the potential is that we go. I mean our life habitat as an example can just the first iteration of that can have 10 people on it, right? And that's a game changer compared to ISS and some of these other things right now. We're looking at iterations of that scale up to like multiple tens of people and then hundreds of people, etc. Right? So I think we're going to see this kind of exponential expanse in terms of the technology on orbit and the number of people that it can house or service.
Yeah, and once we have that first person step back on the moon, that second person I should say, or not, well, that we've had more than that, but this next
Yeah.
person that steps on the moon, once that happens, oh my gosh, it's going to be shocking to see what happens after that. It's like when the iPhone came out, we had no idea how that was going to impact us as a world. I mean, you
Yeah.
have places that don't even have wires for telephones even laid, and they're already instantly connected. So
Yeah.
what are we going to see that we're not expecting, and how is that going to impact us and the speed at what everything is changing? It's just, hold on to your boosters, like I say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's I think goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier of just yeah, I don't think the onus, like we at Sierra Space don't feel that the onus is on us to figure out everything to do in space, right? What we want to do is provide the platform, this destination, the logistics, this place for other people to come. We refer to it sometimes with Orbital Reef as like a multi-use business park, right? Where we have the infrastructure, and people either bring their own module, they bring their own facility that plugs in to it and does something. Like, we want to democratize the access to it so that creativity can flourish in terms of what other people see as ways to build a business, to do something in space, to change the world, right? And we're not, I I think it would be arrogant of us to think that we could do that alone, right? And that we're not intending to. What we want to do is be a key contributor to that and allow other people to come and change the world with us, and bring their ideas. So this is a call to everybody listening. If you have an idea, reach out to us, because we want to hear about it and know what you want to do in space. Because at the end of the day, we need to build platforms, provide the logistics. The highways need to be suitable for the kind of car that you want to build, as an example, right? So we
Right.
need to understand what you're doing in space, so that we can to make sure that we facilitate that and make you as successful as we can.
So what advice do you have for people that are just entering the space or thinking about entering the space industry?
Are you referring to like people at an individual level, like looking like starting to work, or like people who are forming companies, or all of the above?
Or the above, whatever, what advice do you have for companies? Let's just go companies. What,
Yeah,
say that I'm looking at, well, okay, maybe I can look up and go to space. What advice do you have for them to begin?
sure. Yeah, I would say, number one to any company listening is within your challenge with the problem, look up and just see if space maybe even can help that. And at Sierra Space, we're happy to take phone calls from people who maybe don't know space or understand some of the benefits of microgravity, those kind of things. So we're happy to help facilitate initial conversations around helping you look up and understand what are you trying to solve, and is there some historical work that's been done that maybe leads us to believe that there is a solution or a killer app, if you will, in space. I think beyond that, it's ask questions. Don't. We're going to be out at these different conferences. We have a website that you can send inquiries to and stuff. Like, we're very much in market development and education mode right now. We're happy to hear different ideas, and just speak up, I think, is my biggest advice. And don't be afraid. I, there's potentially no bad ideas in space and stuff. So it's just understanding that. But I also think it's make sure that what you're pitching isn't a perpetual motion machine, right? Some of these things, it's got to be bounded in physical principles and those kind of things. But yeah, I think we're in just such a blank canvas right now of what this LEO economy in space could be, that we want to, I don't know, spread a wide net and figure out what's out there, and make sure that we can help facilitate it.
So, and what final words do you want to leave our audience with? How do you how to contact you, how to work with you, that kind of thing. The little the elevator pitch, if you will.
Sure. Well, I think is what we've kind of talked about throughout here. Sierra Space, what we're doing is building these destinations in space, but also we are providing the logistics, to get to and from space. We have other portions of our business that do different components and elements of integrated systems that go into space. So, if you're listening and you have heard anything I just said that remotely touches what you're doing, we'd love to hear from you. So on our website, sierraspace.com, you can reach out, and then we'll facilitate getting that to the right person, who can follow up with you. And if you see us out at a conference or at different industry events and stuff, just come say hi. Love just talking with people, love brainstorming on what you're thinking about doing in space, or what you think could happen in space and our systems and stuff. So much just happens in a 5 to 10 minute conversation in terms of like idea generation, that I find extremely valuable. So, and then, my LinkedIn or whatever, feel free to reach out, Christopher Allison. There's a picture of me with a dream chaser on there. So I think you'll figure out which one is the right one, but also happy to engage with anybody.
So what final thought do you want to leave the audience with today as they go about their day?
I think, and I've said it a few times, but it's when you're faced with a challenge, right? You're solving a problem and you're looking at the tools that you have at your disposal. I would say just always know that access to space, I think, is a tool in that tool belt. So look up sometimes to solve your problems.
And I love that, by the way. So, and I really do appreciate you spending the time with me today, because I know that you just came off paternity leave and you probably have a stack like this of things to do. So I do appreciate your time with me this morning.
No, absolutely. And it's very fun for me. And
sounds good. Sounds
perfect.
good.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
if I don't see you before then, have a good holiday and a happy new year. And then excited to see what happens and excited to read your book. I have your previous book at home on my shelf. So
cool.
I'll have to get the next iteration of Spaceports. So,
well, I'm speaking at the Global Spaceport Summit, and I'm also speaking at Spacecom.
okay,
so,
right.
And I'm assuming you're going to be at Spacecom.
So our team will be, so some of the folks I work with are based in the Florida, Orlando area. So with a new child at home too, right? So I do have.
Yes, everything's different now. Everything.
Yep.
The reason why you drink a cup of coffee is different.
Yes, so. Exactly. Yeah. I appreciate sleep far more than I did before in my life. So.
Please subscribe before you head on over to my YouTube channel for bonus footage on the video version of this podcast. Links to the YouTube and other social media channels can be found on spacemarketingpodcast.com. A special thanks to Christopher Allison from Sierra Space for joining us today and sharing their journey to space. Be sure to check out his links listed in today's show notes. I hope that you have found this podcast useful for your journey as you reach for the stars.